Okay, we are back. Voices of Reason with episode 37. Believe it or not, all three of us have made it tonight. I'm Tony Seliquini.
I'm Dusty Jewell.
And I'm Gabe Lands.
And man, do we have a lot to talk about today. The last time we convened, Gabe was actually running some errands, so he couldn't make it.
Or was Gabe getting promoted that time?
That happened after the recording. But yeah, now that you brought it up, congratulations, Gabe Lands. Sergeant Gabe Lands.
Just in time for me to be discharged from the Army.
Excellent.
That's all right, man.
Thank you. Thank you, though.
So ultimately, now you do outrank me. Civilian.
I'm still technically on orders right now, so.
There you go. But yeah, so it's great to have the three of us together again. Last time we were here, we were talking about the Lincoln dinner. We had a few guests on. We got them by phone. We've had a whole bunch of scandals come out. And, for about a week or two there, all we did was hear about them. And then all of a sudden, nothing.
It's gotten kind of quiet.
And that seems to be happened quite a bit. Anytime something interesting happens, all of a sudden it gets shut down. I mean, we don't hear anything about Benghazi.
Of course, we've got, Eric Holder investigating Eric Holder's Justice Department and their illegal wiretapping of, journalist phones and records. And that even extended all the way to Fox News like 2 years ago.
And Doug Shulman and Bacchus and the IRS.
Well, and the House of Representatives cloakroom. Didn't you hear they tapped the phones there too?
No,
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, they tapped the phones of the House of Representatives, their cloakroom, where like they go and take naps.
That's
and
like
stuff
bugging. That's like bugging the Rose Garden.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I haven't seen anything more about that since it was posted. I don't know. I don't think it's been redacted, but I have not seen or heard anything more about that.
And back to the IRS scandal, there's been multiple letters from senators, from Max Baucus, from Dick Durbin, from our neighboring state of Illinois, that made special requests to target individual groups that were seeking 501c3 or C4 status, and they don't say anything wrong with it, even though it's, in violation of federal law and all.
Yeah. I mean, we had more scandals than that. We had the Associated Press that was being wiretapped. Their phone records were getting subpoenaed somehow. Actually, they didn't even ask for a subpoena. They were just taking the information. You gotta love that
Patriot Act.
It's a matter of national security, so we can do whatever the F we want. America,
unbelievable.
America.
But the real point though I'm trying to make is all of a sudden nothing. I mean, really, the media was a little outraged at first, but how come they're okay with it all of a sudden?
Well, now that's because they got to drum up more fear about Iran and Syria, because they haven't talked about them for a month or so now. They've been kind of on the back burner, so they got to change gears so people still want to bomb Iran and bomb Syria and kill all the people with brown skin.
Yeah, we all know that it's all a case of squirrel.
Look at the shiny object in the sky.
Yep.
Quick.
Let's go ahead and distract you from what's really important.
Is that how McCain was able to sneak into Syria this weekend?
Yeah, happy Memorial Day, fellow soldiers.
I wish that guy would just lose his mind and just run off, just disappear into the desert forever.
Coincidentally, The Onion, they published an article about John McCain, very similar to that exact story.
That's awesome. But yeah, so I guess I'm not the only one. I guess it's more popular than that thought is pretty popular.
He went missing Memorial Day and somehow wound up in Syria mumbling gibberish to all the people there and all the rebels.
Or if he got abducted. Actually, we were kind of talking about that before we started recording the show. I mean, it would be interesting, but had he got abducted, people like us would probably be talking about how that was actually planned and that it was just to go and get us into another war. You never know, But there's a way to go and turn a conspiracy, or turn anything into a conspiracy.
Yeah.
But seriously, though, John McCain sucks. All right. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into some announcements we'd like to make.
Well, first and foremost, we need to remind everybody that we still have Voices of Reason t-shirts that arrived a while back. If you want to make a purchase, please visit our website, voicesofreason.org, and click on the store tab. There you can place your order, and we can process payment electronically. So come and get them. We got sizes all the way from mediums all the way up to triple extra large, I believe.
Yeah, we have triple extra large, and we also have to have a couple smalls left too. Also, if you visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/tasteofliberty and you like our page and share our pinned photo at the top, you'll be entered in a chance to win a free shirt, including postage, anywhere in the world. And all you have to do is like and share, and you will be entered into that drawing. So, good luck, and we hope you do that.
This weekend, there will be a one-day political leadership class in Cedar Falls, hosted by the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership and also sponsored by Campaign for Liberty and Liberty, Iowa. This will take place on Saturday, June 1st from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Regular admission is $35, but there is a discount for students, taking it to only $20. This event will be held at the Comfort Suites Hotel in Cedar Falls. Tickets are going fast. I will be there, so please come out and join us.
Right on, and if you want to go ahead and register for that, just visit eventbrite.com. And on June 8th at 1 p.m., Campaign for Liberty is holding a Central Iowa meeting at the Grimes Community Complex at 410 Southeast Main Street. Now, earlier we reported that it would be held at Lions Park. However, that location has been changed, and it will be at the Grimes Community Complex. It's going to be a social event, and the winners of the scholarship program will be announced.
And it's no surprise, but our quote of the day will be coming from Justin Amash, and it's quite literally impossible to interpret what he says any other way, because this is literally what is happening right now. He said, "The IRS takes your money. Congress uses your money to arm our enemies. The IRS takes more of your money, and Congress uses that money to fight the enemies that they just armed."
Which is exactly what's going on in Syria.
America!
And we are going to discuss that further at the second half of the show.
Yeah, we'll be getting into that in the discussion.
And that's going to go and take us to our first commercial break, guys. And when we come back, we will have the lightning round.
The one and only world-famous lightning round. Hi, this is Gabe Lands, and I'm the acting director of Iowa Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of currently serving military, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help us God. Our oath is to the Constitution, not to the politicians, and we will not obey unconstitutional and thus illegal and immoral orders, such as orders to disarm the American people or to place them under martial law and deprive them of their ancient right to jury trial. We Oath Keepers have drawn a line in the sand. We will not just follow orders. If this sounds like you, I invite you to check us out on our website, oathkeepers.org, or you can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/oathkeepersia. Well, as you can clearly hear, our professional production engineer and audio technician have now introduced some bumper music into our broadcast here.
Just like the big-time professionals.
We are now legit.
We bring nothing but the highest quality material to our listeners here at Voices of Reason.
And now it's time for
The Voices of Reason Lightning Round!
Starting off the lightning round, this comes to us from the Capitalism Institute. Titled, McCain Visits Syria, Meets with Allies of Al-Qaeda. John McCain traveled to Syria in favor of the U.S. giving weapons to rebel forces in that country. The catch? There are thousands of Al-Qaeda militants among the rebel forces, and the rebel troops are strong allies of Al-Qaeda and other radical Islamic extremist groups. Now, I'm going to stop here real quick. Because remember, not so long ago, we were talking about the rebels in Syria and how there was an article, I believe it was from InfoWars, but it linked to an RT article where they said they quoted the Syrian rebels saying, when they're done with Assad, they vowed to fight the United States.
I remember it.
So we are arming.
That was back in 2012.
They're voting, and John McCain is physically meeting with people who have sworn to fight the United States once Assad has been conquered.
And I do recall Ben Swan making that same connection between the Syrian rebels and Al-Qaeda.
Yes. So just remember that while we're going through the rest of this. Okay, so continuing. This shows us just how delusional and insane DC politics are. McCain has shown himself to be a massive ally recently, not of liberty, but of tyranny in almost any and all forms possible. It is not a good plan to send weapons to people we are fighting. It is not a good plan to go into debt to arm radical Islamic groups. That's why Rand Paul gave this speech against arming the Muslim Brotherhood. This will lead to dead, innocent people. McCain's position on Syria is that he's upset at Obama for not doing enough to aid the rebels. He falsely believes that since the dictator is an evil man, the rebels must be the good guys. For example, the leader of the Syrian opposition is a radical left-wing former communist. Why would radical Islamic groups work with him? Because once the collapse of the current regime occurs, Syria will be far more open to Islamic groups taking a much more powerful role. In fact, Islamic groups are already taking over many regions during this war. They're allies with a common end goal. Replace the current tyranny with a new tyranny. We should not have any part in this. Taking a side in a conflict where both sides support tyranny is nuts. Doing it in a way that will likely lead to U.S. weapons going to Al-Qaeda is simply disastrous at best. Rand Paul's been fighting this move because he understands that you can't buy friends with weapons, and you can't turn Islamic tyrants into peaceful people with a handshake, and the civil wars of other countries are not our freaking business. As Rand Paul said when McCain voted to arm the rebels, this is an important moment. You will be funding today the allies of Al-Qaeda. It's an irony you cannot overcome. Now, let that sink in for just a second. You are voting today to fund the allies of Al-Qaeda. Allies of Al-Qaeda, the people who are killing our soldiers in Afghanistan, the people who killed our soldiers in Iraq, and who are the cause of all of our headaches and the reason we're doing all this empire building all over the Middle East. So think about that the next time you want to support this foreign policy and you hear about a soldier dying in the news, or you see a local soldier who was injured, or you talk to a soldier. We're voting to arm the people who are killing and disfiguring these people permanently.
We've sacrificed over 4,000 American lives already to Al-Qaeda.
It's absolutely a shame on this nation. So ending, it says, Rand is right. McCain is wrong. We have to understand this, or we'll continue arming terrorists and wasting more of our money. We should not be arming radical Islamic groups. I mean, how can you disagree with that? If you are a American who is opposed to putting our troops needlessly at harm's way, or in any way aiding people who would be have even a slight notion of fighting against our troops or harming our troops, or aiding people who would aim to kill those troops, how could anybody support this?
Right, and it just goes to show that even way back in 2008 when I was telling everybody that, you know, here's the new Republican nominee for president, John McCain, and he's going to be nothing different than what we expect him to be, another warmonger, another guy who's just going to go out there and bring us into new wars, and here he is going around telling everybody to support the troops. In the meantime, he's basically getting us ready for the next war so we can go and send our kids to go and fight. And it's all in the name of the military-industrial complex, and especially when you can keep the fear-mongering going on, when you can keep this country believing that, I mean, come on, man! My daughter has not known her country in a state of peace time.
Well,
ever.
How is this not treason? This is literally aiding and abetting the enemy.
Absolutely.
The enemies of the United States of America. This is he traveled to Syria on Memorial Day to meet with these people. Of all days out of the year, Memorial Day, that is literally crapping on the graves of every soldier who has ever fought and died to try and do what they think is protecting this country.
And unfortunately, it didn't start with John McCain. Senator John McCarry.
That's rather funny.
Senator John Kerry, who is now our Secretary of State, and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi are also frequent visitors and travelers to Syria to cavort with known dictators. And these visits from Pelosi and John Kerry were at a time when Syria was listed as a state sponsor of terrorism.
So wouldn't you say that all three of these people have actually been involved in treasonous activity?
I wouldn't call it.
Communicating with the enemy, abetting the enemy, aiding the enemy, voting to arm the enemy.
I wouldn't call it treason.
If what treason is really defined as nothing more than betrayal of one's country.
I'm not gonna step there, but I would say that the simple fact is there is no good guy in the fight, and it doesn't matter if we've been on the side of Bashar al-Assad before, even while we called Syria a sponsor of terror, and now we're on the other side, funding Al-Qaeda with guns, with arms against the person that we just propped up.
Well, how about we just call it what it really is? Premeditated treason. I mean, not treason yet because we haven't exactly declared war on them. But let's admit it. We're arming our future enemy.
No. We haven't declared war on them, but we have the authorization for the use of military force to go and get those people who are associated with the attacks on 9/11.
Wait. We still declare war?
No, we don't. We haven't since World War II. But we have the AUMF, right? They're associated forces. Al-Qaeda. We've been fighting Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Al-Qaeda was a big cell there. Then it's Afghanistan. Now Al-Qaeda is going into Syria. Al-Qaeda is spread into Africa. Now we're in Africa, and they're in Yemen, and all these other places.
And Al-Qaeda's in Syria, so now we're authorized to go into Syria.
And
give them weapons?
Yes, and so
that's what I mean.
And they voted, minus a few like Rand Paul, to fund and arm these rebels with American weapons. How is that not treason?
And then on Monday, the White House refused to comment. When the press went to the White House and asked the Obama administration, what do you know and what do you have to say about Senator McCain? Did you know what he did before he did it? They refused to comment. No comment.
And you know
I mean, how is the spokesman for the White House? How is the executive branch allowed to just simply turn their back on the people and say, "I'm not telling you shit"?
I mean, that's kind of how Kerry and Pelosi were allowed to travel all these years in the past. But it's kind of funny because the Obama administration, all this time, when Russia is backing Syria, has been saying, "Well, we're just giving the rebels intelligence. We're just giving them data. We're just giving them surveillance and satellite photos. We're not giving them weapons." And now we just voted to give them weapons.
Exactly.
It wasn't just intelligence and data. It was communications and radios. We were helping them with that as well. And now it's escalated. And I want somebody, if you can disprove that this is not treason, even based on the fact that these same people in Syria, the Syrian rebels, they said that they vowed to fight the United States once they were done with Assad. That is proven fact. That is in news articles all over the internet.
I mean, John McCain may as well just go and vote to give North Korea nukes. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done the same thing. They've vowed to take care of the American evil empire.
We need to save some of this discussion for our actual discussion later on in the broadcast here.
True that.
So we should move on because this is a lightning round.
It is. Okay.
Stay tuned.
So moving on, completely different than Syria, is some news in the medical industry from themedicaldaily.com. Portland, Maine doctor forgoes insurance to provide affordable care to community with more time to spend on house calls and quality care rather than bills. Dr. Ciampi from Maine feels he can better serve patients in need as a result. He says people often don't know how much care truly costs and usually concern themselves with the copay required after an office visit. But the dark underbelly of insurance systems is that medical costs have skyrocketed, and patients without medical insurance have to pay astronomical prices because of politics and not because of the cost of care. This is one of the factors that led a Portland, Maine physician to stop accepting insurance, private or governmental, from his patients. Dr. Michael Ciampi changed the policy in his office on April 1st of this year, knowing that he would do better, or that he would be better serving his patients by not being told what to do by insurance companies and government healthcare systems. What the doctor did was simple. The doctor has posted prices of office visits and procedures on the website of his practice. What would seem astronomical, $150 for an office visit, is actually cheap if one considers how much is paid for health insurance and premiums every year. Dr. Ciampi told the Bangor Daily News that of his 2,000 patients, only a few hundred decided to stop coming to the office because of the policy change. The doctor is free now to make house calls and charge affordable rates to patients who cannot afford health care. The doctor expects that his practice will make more money with the new policy in place by attracting many who are self-employed, like myself,
And myself.
who do not have insurance. I do carry my own, or have insurance with large deductibles. By collecting money from patients at the end of the visit, Dr. Ciampi no longer needs to spend money and time sending out bills or billing insurance companies. Quote, if more doctors were able to do this, that would be real healthcare reform. That's when we'd see the cost of medicine truly go down, said Dr. Ciampi. This change in policy comes after a government report showing that medical procedures at hospitals across the country vary widely. For instance, the same medical procedure could cost 3 times the amount between two hospitals only miles apart, and at some hospitals, 1 pill of aspirin costs more than a bottle of 100 pills. Insurance companies usually pick up the cost of these overpriced medical charges, raising the price across the board for those with no insurance and for those that pay for insurance premiums. Because Ciampi is a primary care physician, the price policy is not for emergency medical attention, only typical lab tests for diabetes, pregnancy testing, and EKGs, among other procedures. And then they give the actual link to view the prices for his practice. I mean, it's a little bit like walking into McDonald's and seeing the menu and seeing what's on the menu, being able to see the price.
It's a beautiful thing, and this is like he's Patch Adams. I mean, what he's done is he's basically said, hey, you know what? I'm going to circumvent this entire system that's really nothing more than a big scam against the consumer. I am not going to accept the insurance. Therefore, when you come in over here and you've got a sore throat and you come in and you need to go and get a prescription for something, I'm going to write you the prescription. I'm going to fill the prescription because I've already purchased the goods to sell it to you. I've got my own pharmacy here. Boom. Now, I don't know if many people know this, but a lot of times insurance companies will actually say that they'll take care of 50% of the cost. 50% of the costs. And then what ends up happening is that you pay your copay, you pay the 50%, and then when the bill actually comes down to the physician's office, they're like, well, you know, we do a lot of work with you. We're only going to actually charge you 25%. So basically, the consumer is paid 50% on the bill the way it was originally, and then the physician actually only has, they only actually pay off another 25% of that. So who's really raking in the money? The insurance company.
And just think of it, though. Now that they don't have to deal with insurance, my wife, this is a little bit different. She worked in a chiropractic office, and for the different insurance agencies, they have to use different software for billing things to different insurance companies, and the coverages that they change is different between every company. So just think, if you go to a standard charge for XYZ procedure, you can basically circumvent all the software needed for billing to insurance company. You don't have to spend the time on the phone and the manpower and pay them to be on the phone with their representatives trying to figure out billing and coding and all that. And you can just do a straight, like going to the gas station. Okay, that'll be $75. Here's $75 cash. Here's your receipt. Good to go. Just think of the amount of time they can save alone in just that simple little change. Think of the cost it's going to change when they don't have to license the software from the insurance company and things like that. And they don't have to spend time hiring new employees, training them on the software or training them to the ins and outs of how to negotiate with insurance company to get something that's beneficial for them. You know, I mean, it's just I can see nothing but benefits coming from this rather than the few obvious negatives of maybe a few people leaving. But I totally can see how he would definitely end up making more money in the end. But on top of all that,
the consumer saves money,
yes,
which is great.
And it's like he said, it's going to healthcare for the person to better serve them for what's appropriate for their needs, rather than trying to do what's best for them that the insurance company will pay for.
Well, let's just face it, man. The insurance companies are nothing more than middlemen now.
And, you know, the insurance companies force those doctors to jump through a bunch of hoops and to over-test and over-examine and over-diagnose.
Yeah.
So you test a person for everything under the sun because, oh, my God, what happens if you miss something? Malpractice and all kinds of lawsuits. So you use your best medical knowledge to determine the course of treatment for your patient.
I think it's great, and that is a service for the people, and that's the kind of doctor that I want. I hope, especially this coming year when Obamacare regs start really cracking down, I hope we see a lot more of this. I think this will be great.
Yes, sir. Okay, our third and final lightning round story comes from www.rawstory.com. The Wire creator David Simon eviscerates the dystopia creating war on drugs by Ed Vulliamy with The Observer. David Simon surged into the American mainstream with a bleak vision of the devastation wrought by drugs on his hometown of Baltimore, Maryland. The Wire, hailed by many as the greatest television drama of all time. But what keeps him there is his apocalyptic and unrelenting heresy over the failed war on drugs, the multi-billion-dollar worldwide crusade launched by President Richard Nixon in 1971. Okay, when Simon brought that heresy to London last week to take part in a debate hosted by The Observer, he was inevitably asked what reformers celebrate as recent successes, such as votes in Colorado and Washington to legalize marijuana. I'm against it, Simon told his stunned audience at the Royal Institution on Thursday night. The last thing I want to do is rationalize the easiest, the most benign end of this. The whole concept needs to be changed. The debate reframed. I want the thing to fall as one complete edifice. If they manage to let a few white middle-class people off the hook, that's very dangerous. If they can find a way for white kids in middle-class suburbia to get high without them going to jail, and getting them to think that what they do is a million miles away from black kids taking crack, well, that is what politicians would do. If marijuana were exempted from the war on drugs, he insisted, it'd be another 10 or 40 years of assigning people of color to this dystopia. Simon took no prisoners. In his vision, the war on and the curse of drugs are inseparable from what he called in his book, The Death of Working Class America, the deindustrialization and ravaging of cities that were once the engine rooms and, in Baltimore's case, the seaboard of an industrial superpower. The war is about the disposal of what Simon called, in his most unforgiving but cogent term, excess Americans, once a labor force but no longer of use to capitalism. He went so far as to call the war on drugs a holocaust in slow motion. Simon said he begins with the assumption that drugs are bad, but also that the war on drugs has always proceeded along racial lines since the banning of opium. It is waged not against dangerous substances, but against the poor, the excess Americans. And with striking and subversive originality, he posited the crisis in stark economic terms. We don't need 10 to 12% of our population. They've been abandoned. They don't have barbed wire around them, but they might as well. Capitalism, said Simon, has tried to jail its way out of the problem. The prison industry has been given over to capitalism. If we need to get rid of these people, we may as well make some money out of getting rid of them. Simon said he had no faith in our political leadership to ever address the problem. There's no incentive to walk away from law and order as a political currency. He said that the change would come, if it does, from jurors simply refusing to send husbands, sons, and fathers from their communities to jail. That is how prohibition of alcohol ended. They couldn't find 12 Americans who would send a 13th to jail for selling bathtub gin. He regarded legalization of drugs as a word invented by advocates of the drug war to make the other side look goofy, saying everything should be legalized. The issue is, how do we get out of here? And I say decriminalization. As with other controlled substances, taxed and regulated. He later said he did not think change would come of any moral decision because someone just figures out this is costing too much money. Simon replied that America had fought proxy wars across the world for decades. The war on drugs in Latin America was among them. On the carnage in neighboring Mexico, he said, if 40,000 Mexicans are dead, we don't give a damn as long as it stays on that side of the border. Turn northern Mexico into an abattoir, so long as it doesn't get into Tucson. If we can fight to the last Mexican for a suburban American to send their kids safely to junior high school, we will. Okay, now, the thing I think is most important about this entire thing is that he's not willing to go and just just allow certain, some might call it progress on the drug war. Legalize marijuana here in this state, legalize a little bit of this in this state. No, he's more of an abolitionist. Abolitionism is the only way, just get rid of prohibition. And here on our show, we've talked about prohibition in the past. It does not work. It's a bad thing.
Well, do you think if they started calling the war on drugs just prohibition, do you think that would change people's instantaneously have a different connection?
Instantaneously.
because you think prohibition, you think back to the days. And personally, I kind of get a fond feeling of like the moonshiners who would try and make it and sell it and try and outrun the law.
Exactly, because it was called prohibition, just like you said.
And now, like alcohol's legal now, and so many people drink, and it's, it has its bad sides, but tons of people do it responsibly as well.
But amazing the kind of feeling and thought process that goes through your mind when you think of somebody who's working in a clandestine laboratory creating ecstasy, MDMA, or something like that, or even something that's very similar to any pharmaceutical drug being produced by a corporate entity.
Yeah,
but they're going to be selling it on the black market.
The only difference is the government gets kickbacks.
Oh, sure.
And congressmen get kickbacks from the pharmaceutical industry in order
to FDA.
And to put pressure on the FDA to push this through and give it their seal of approval.
Right, but it's just like Ron Paul was talking about in the past when he was saying that, obviously the war on drugs does have one special victim group. If you think about it, I mean, just look at what is approximately 80% of 80% of inmates tend to be black.
Well, yeah, but just look at it this way. It is a war on the poor, because how many rich celebrities have done cocaine, have done all sorts of drugs, gotten in DUIs and wrecked their cars and driven through buildings, things like that. How many celebrities have done that?
Yeah, look at President Obama. He's like, yeah, I snorted some cocaine.
They didn't catch him doing that, though. He admitted it. But how many celebrities have been caught in the act,
he talks about
arrested?
doing it, but he hasn't done anything about the fact that, people's parents, a 6-year-old's father's going to jail, is losing his right to vote and his right to own a firearm on account of having a gram of marijuana in his pocket.
That's what I'm saying. How many celebrities that have done coke and all sorts of other things, thrown coke parties like Charlie Sheen, how many of them are serving prison sentences for it?
Exactly.
I can't think of a single one, personally, off the top of my head.
Decriminalized.
So if it's not a war against poor people, then how come Charlie Sheen's not sitting in jail?
And this is a discussion that I'm sure that a lot of people in our audience would just love to debate and give their feedback on it. So I encourage you to visit our website, www.voicesofreason.org. Email us at comments@voicesofreason.org. And check us out on Facebook, www.facebook.com/tastetheliberty.
We've also got a great video on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/tastetheliberty, where you can check out some incredible statistics on the drug war. And watch the incarceration rate from the Nixon era on up and see just exactly what happened when they declared the war on drugs.
Yeah, we make up what? I think America makes up like 4% of the world's population, but yet we have 25% of the world's prison population.
Yep, they do.
Something's wrong there.
The land of the free, the land of the imprisoned.
And
you know what, man? Simon made a very good point when he was talking about that. It's all for the prison industry.
Well, yeah, because we talked about inmate workers. It's literally becoming slave labor, prison labor. It's becoming a profitable industry. And what did we just talk about just a few episodes ago? They said we would expand this program if we had more workers.
Yeah, somebody let slip. Yeah.
So with all the corruption, John McCain going to Syria and physically talking with the same group that is fighting our soldiers in Afghanistan and voting to arm them with American advanced weaponry and support, with all the corruption going on with IRS, all the scandals with the AP, do you really think that
Benghazi,
there isn't some sort of possibility that within our government system there isn't a concentrated effort to try and continue the drug war, to try and put more people in prison, to try and profit these very, very lucrative prison working systems? And not to mention, it's not just state-run prisons that do this, but private, for-profit prisons that do it as well, that are all over the United States. You can't tell me that there aren't people who are willing, at the expense of other people's lives and families, to lobby to continue this and to incarcerate more people just to line their pockets. To say that is asinine and it's naive.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and break for commercial. When we come back, we will begin our discussion segment.
And to those of you that have left the party, we want to earn your trust again. We're going to be a Republican Party that people will want to join.
But first, we have to get the grassroots at the same height
and control them.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Any another chair? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider.
The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman!
It's unfair to us. We sat here and objected. He said, are there any objections? We objected. And you know, it's like, why even ask the question at that point?
Maine got screwed of half their delegates, more than half actually. That's why their governor's not here today, because he said he wouldn't come down unless their delegates got seated. Half of them got taken away, and they were replaced by people that the Republican Party, the RNC paid.
Keep mowing the grassroots down and see what happens.
This fight's not over. Help us defend liberty at voicesofreason.org. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have traitors in our midst.
Okay, yeah, so we have that Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, I believe it's called.
Senate Foreign Relations Committee?
Yes, sir. Okay. And we happen to have the roll call on who voted to approve giving arms to Syrian rebels.
These are the traitors that are amongst us as we speak. Barbara Boxer, Benjamin L. Cardine, Robert P. Casey Jr., Jean Shaheen, Christopher Coons, Richard J. Durbin,
Dick Durbin from Illinois.
Dick Durbin.
Tim Kaine, James E. Risch, Marco Rubio, Ron Johnson.
Is that Tea Party Ron Johnson from Wisconsin?
Man, every time they so-called Tea Party Ron Johnson.
Jeff Flake, John McCain, imagine that, and John Brasso.
From Wyoming. Flake and McCain are both Arizona, I believe.
So, to give credit where credit is due, these were the 3 nay votes. Rand Paul, Chris Murphy, and Tom Udall. The only 3 people, the 15 on the Foreign Relations Committee, who voted against arming the Syrian rebels, the same people who are associated with those killing our soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Now, granted, this was just a committee vote so far, but all you've got to do is read the names on the list to see how bipartisan that vote was. You've got people like Dick Durbin, one of the most liberal senators in the Senate, voting with Marco Rubio. I mean, what's going on?
No doubt. However, everywhere I looked on the reports, they always said that the vote was 15-3. But our little roll call list here only has 16 people on it, which is weird. I want to know who the 2. Maybe there were 2 abstainments.
That is curious.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I guess we'll look into that in a minute. But yeah, so here we are. We got the issue of Syria. Okay, we got President Assad. Okay, now President Assad is now dealing with a insurgency of Syrian rebels. And do we know what the Syrian rebels really want? What is it about the current Syrian government that they are protesting? Do we know for sure? Is it anything more than is it religion based?
They wanted, yes, in a way, they wanted further democratic reforms, far more than what Assad was willing to pursue. He began the road when he saw the Arab Spring spring up in all these other countries. He said, okay, I'm going to spur along some democratic reforms that were never ever going to be enough to satisfy the rebels that rose up, because their aim isn't democratic reform.
It's not. Just like in Egypt, it's not.
Right. I mean, the aim, the goal in all of these countries is control. And until he's been ousted, they don't have control. They haven't succeeded.
And earlier when we were discussing the lightning round article, when we were talking about John McCain going to Syria to talk to the Syrian rebels, you had brought up something about the pipeline.
Yes, one of the recent articles that we posted to our Facebook page explained all of the interest in Syria And it comes all the way from the Persian Gulf and the tiny Gulf nation of Qatar, or Qatar, however you want to pronounce it. Qatar produces a lot of natural gas. In fact, they produce so much that they can't get rid of it all because the market is pretty much saturated without the addition of some sort of pipeline, because they sit right next to Saudi Arabia, who is using their control of the oil market to push their brand of Wahhabism, the Wahhabism Islamic sect. And so Qatar wants to push their own brand of Islam via their control of the natural gas market. So they need their own pipeline to ship their product to new markets. Enter Syria. They need pipelines running through Iraq, Syria, all the way to Turkey that would be able to feed a new market in the form of Eastern and Western Europe. Well, you can see why that would be an issue for a country like Russia, because currently Europe is dependent on natural gas from Russia. Most of the Russian pipelines run through the Ukraine. So every time Russia doubles the price on their natural gas, Ukraine then doubles down and does the same thing. I mean, it just trickles down the line. And so everybody feels the pain. So everybody in Europe is dependent and held hostage by the Russians.
So in other words, right now the Russians have a monopoly on the natural gas energy commodity going to Europe. Qatar has an opportunity to go and compete with Russia. However, they would require them going through Saudi Arabia, which isn't going to happen because, like we were just talking about, all these ideologies are attached to commodities.
Right.
I mean, and then, even the United States has an ideology attached to our export. What's ours? Weaponry. Anyway.
And that's not a joke either. We are the biggest weapons exporter
Oh, sure.
in the world.
I mean, that's the military-industrial complex.
We are on both sides of every conflict.
Yes, because we gain. We have something, at least the leaders and the elitists have something to gain. The elite, rather.
We learned well from World War II.
Yes, unfortunately. In the meantime,
these particular issues are precisely what gets Russia's involvement in Syria and what pits Russia against Israel, Israel against Syria. We've got some additional source material to bring up here, but the Russians are proceeding to provide missiles to the Syrians, and Israel is standing by saying that we are going to attack any additional arms shipments coming out of Syria because they think that Syria is smuggling all of their weapons out to give to the likes of Hezbollah, who's completely unaccountable.
Without a doubt.
And, it's not even necessary anymore for Israel to cross their borders. I mean, they have air superiority wherever they go, but they don't even need to cross the border. They can launch their missiles from within their own airspace, from within their own territorial borders, launch it and fly that stuff 100 miles into the country, into Syria, and bomb wherever they want.
And now, of course, the Obama administration through the United Nations is trying to push for a no-fly zone, and the Russians are saying that they are going to go and send these shipments out to Syria, to Assad. And now the United States, via people like John McCain and, the majority of that Committee on Foreign Relations, is opting, they want to send weaponry to the rebels. Man, we got all the ingredients for World War III happening here.
Right, let's not forget that the Russian Navy is currently off the coast of Syria, and they have authorized, they've authorized different levels of warfare for those forces. There's a local level, there's a regional war level, and so on. As things escalate, as things progress, they have given more and more and more latitude to those forces, and they have already warned Israel that, hey, we're arming the Syrians. If you attack the Syrians and bomb the stuff that we just delivered, we're going to attack you.
Wow, it's like we narrowly avoided so many different potential for war, only to end up with this one, which is really starting to look inescapable.
In remember when this is a little bit different angle on it, but remember when Obama said that the red line for intervention in Syria was going to be the use of chemical weapons?
Yes.
remember when we talked about how we were going to start arming the
and
rebels?
yet we were still using drones and we were still sending aircraft into the airspace.
The rebels were going to start attacking the chemical weapon storage facilities, which they did. And now there was a confirmed use of some sort of chemical weapon over there, which is muddled if it was the rebels or if it was the Assad regime. Doesn't it seem all too convenient that if we're going to if we're not,
it worked for Bush, it'll work for Obama.
If we're not already arming the Syrians, we're considering it in a vote. But we are providing intelligence for them, all sorts of communications and things like that. We probably provided them with all the locations of their chemical weapons storage facilities. If we have people like in the CIA who are trying to control this to a certain degree, wouldn't it be in interest if we want to get into a conflict with them or give ourselves a reason to go in there to tell these rebels, hey, now that we're arming you, go in, take these chemical weapons if you don't have them already from your previous attacks, and start using them. And then we're just going to blame it on the Assad regime. No one's going to know the difference, because how are we going to prove it one way or the other? And then that gives us the green light to go ahead with full-scale intervention.
Well, we already have the green light, like you said, because of Al-Qaeda. So all we're basically going to do is give them the weapons of mass destruction that they can use to go and elicit popular acceptance of the whole idea.
So even if we don't have it on one front, the green light, they just have another backup plan.
Right, and what's even more hypocritical is that there was a Russian transport of a whole bunch of helicopter gunships that supposedly, according to the Russians, they were under contract to repair. That these are already owned and purchased by the Syrian military, that the Russians upgraded and repaired and were simply returning them. And we objected. We said, no, we don't want that those munitions delivered to Syria, because we're not arming the Syrian rebels. Oh wait, we just voted to do that.
Yep, and committed anyhow, right?
So I mean, the very thing that was keeping the Russians out from intervening militarily, we have just voted to eliminate and to brush aside.
It's completely intentional. Escalations that are happening. It's 100% intentional. And if it's not evidenced by all of these facts,
well, it's so irrational. Is what it all is. It's so irrational.
Yeah.
It's enough to make a person just their head pop.
Why does American what puts our national security at stake if there's a conflict in Syria?
Nothing.
It threatens our homes or our civil rights here in the United States. What does a conflict in Syria between two completely separate entities have to do with us?
I mean, considering that Al-Qaeda is already there, this civil war isn't going to really affect that or make anything worse for us. I don't understand, unless, of course, I mean, we have something to gain out of this, out of arming them. Well, when I say we, I mean, the powers that be.
One of the things that we would stand to gain,
the puppet masters,
is that the Assad regime is Shiite. And I want to make sure I got that correct. They are Shiite, which is what ties them directly to the Iranians.
I was going to say.
That's what creates that strong bond. Now, we just intervened in Iraq and established a Shiite regime in Iraq, which automatically bonded them and brought them closer to Iran, who were adamantly opposed to. But the Alawite Shiite minority sect in Syria is the sect that's in charge and running the country. So naturally, you have a lot of Sunni disaffected Muslims that would prefer to be in charge, feel completely out of the system, disaffected,
and definitely don't trust the United States after what we did with them in the first Persian Gulf War. Where we went out there to give them aid, and then we pulled out right in time for Saddam Hussein and the Shiite Taliban to go and just rock them.
Or just even evidenced by the fact what happened in Egypt.
Because am I mistaken?
Well, the Shiites, the Marsh Arab Shiites in Iraq were the ones that got massacred when we said, yeah, rise up.
It was. Okay, it was not the Sunnis. So the Taliban is Sunni.
The Taliban is Sunni.
Oh, okay. Well, then take what I just said and just reverse it.
But the Syrians weren't exactly friendly to us during the first Persian Gulf War either. I mean, they were not to be trusted then. I mean, some of the British SAS and American Special Forces that ran for the border, that were operating in far remote western airfields in Iraq, ran for the border and got caught up with some of the Syrian forces, and they didn't get quite the friendly reception and the aid that they needed or required or were promised. But either way, I mean, we've been on both sides of this conflict, as we discussed earlier. You know, we've been sending John Kerry and Nancy Pelosi to shore up Assad, and his father before was a dictator, and you know, I've heard rumors of people being buried in cement. You know, that's not a very, you know, stable way to build anything. But still, you hear the rumors. You know,
I don't know, cement's a pretty good foundation. But a bump up.
But you know that people are being tortured under the Assad regime previously and probably continuing, and now we're propping up the rebels. I mean, there is no good side.
And so, just for a little historical refresher for everybody, let's just go to a quick sound clip of what Hillary Clinton said when testifying before Congress real quick.
The former Secretary of State.
Yeah. Hillary effing Clinton.
We also have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan.
The same people who were
going
to be fighting in Syria.
Them control Central Asia.
Except that it's not the Soviets anymore.
But
went to work.
Same difference.
And it was President Reagan in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these mujahideen. And let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated. They lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, it wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow because we will harvest. So we then left Pakistan. We said...
Wait, did you just say, careful what we sow because we will harvest, like blowback?
Oh!
Continuing.
Okay, fine. You deal with the stingers that we've left all over
so weird
your
hearing
country.
Hillary Clinton be honest.
You deal with the mines that are along the border. And by the way, we don't want to have anything to do with you. In fact, we're sanctioning you. So we stopped dealing with the Pakistani military and with ISI, and we now are making up for a lot of lost time.
So there you go.
So in other words, we created Al-Qaeda.
We created, and we funded, and we helped the Al-Qaeda overthrow the Soviet Union in where?
Pakistan.
Afghanistan.
I mean, Afghanistan.
And now the exact same scenario is going to be going up, because if Russia comes in to aid Syria, we're going to be arming and funding Al-Qaeda in Syria to try and fight and kill Russians and Syrians.
Just like we funded Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan to kill the Soviets.
Except this time, we're likely to go and see Europe get involved. We're likely to see Israel get involved. And we're likely to see the entire, well, pretty much the Muslim Brotherhood's going to get involved, because they're going to be frothing at the mouth at any chance to get involved in anything that can allow them to get in combat with Israel right now.
You know, I can't even give you the lineup of who would side with who, because, well, Egypt and Israel have a peace treaty, but the Muslim Brotherhood is in charge of Egypt.
I mean, I hate to say this, but I mean, every single time we've had a discussion about something that's going on in the news, guys, about, 4 to 6 months later, it happens. What we've said is going to happen.
It's uncanny.
And I'm really,
how many different stories we've brought up.
And we're looking at World War now.
Well,
it could happen.
We haven't had one for a while, so I mean, it's kind of like that new movie coming out, the Purge.
I mean, but you know what? There's not enough people enlisting now. I bet you start to see the draft come back too.
Well, but
hate to be wrong about that.
Let's not forget what they said. I'd
love to be wrong about that. I mean,
let's not forget what Russia and China said about Iran. If Iran gets tied into this, if Syria and Iran join forces, Russia and China both, like the next biggest militaries in the world, both pledge their support to Iran if America tried to, start pressing their buttons or take action against them. So what do you think is going to happen if America wants to try and push it to the limit and keep trying to piss everybody in the world off, and we go into Syria and then we fund Al-Qaeda, and then the Russians move in because Israel attacks the Russian shipment of weapons or whatever going to Syria.
Well, we already know that the relationship between the United States right now and Russia is pretty poor, and we already heard about John Kerry being held up for 3 hours talking to Putin. We already know that one country that we haven't even discussed right now is another superpower. What's China's take on all this?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's where China would come into play. Is if Iran, I know they've pledged their support to Iran. I don't know if they pledged support to Syria, but I'm guessing if Syria was going to be getting the hard knocks, Iran would probably find a way to at least voice their support. And who knows?
Do you think that the nuclear powers of India and Pakistan are just going to stand idly by either? I mean, they're going to get involved.
It's not unlikely to say that China would probably back Russia as well in the Syrian conflict. And we don't want to do that. I mean, it's like the quote off of Zoolander where Mugatu says he's like the only person who sees this and he feels like he's taking crazy pills. I mean, that's like what this is. It's crazy pills. It's so stupid. I don't even know what to say.
Me and Dusty are like, what?
You guys never seen that?
I've watched it once. I don't remember anything except for the fact that it was
created a piano key
weird.
necktie. His same faces. He makes the same face. They're all the same. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
I'll have to.
I'll
check it out.
Go watch Zoolander. You haven't lived unless you've seen that movie. But
good actor though. I love Ben Stiller. Okay, but man, yeah. I mean, that's something serious to chew on, guys. Well, we do have all the ingredients for World War,
and we not only do we have all the ingredients, but we have all the ingredients from different recipes, different backup plans in case one doesn't go that way. There's a totally different angle they could come from. It's nothing good is going to come of this.
Man, what's next though? Maybe there's another puzzle jigsaw piece that has to be put in place that's just going to make it even more insane. What's the next thing? What can you imagine? What is something kind of teetering on?
The euro. The euro.
Well, I was going to say we could throw the central bank issue into the mix because I don't remember if Syria is still on the list of countries without a Rothschild-controlled central bank.
I believe they are because
it's a list of like 3: North Korea, Cuba.
There was 7 at the beginning of the Iraq War. There were 7 countries that were not on a central banking system.
Before that, it was up to 11 before Afghanistan even. So, I mean, Afghanistan was on the list. Libya was on the list. Iraq was on the list. I mean, you just knock off all these different countries. Sudan was on the list, and now we've, carved off southern Sudan.
And I believe it was a list, and it was a project called like the New American Century or something like that. And that's when you start kind of going out into what people would call conspiracy theories, but there is a concentrated effort to globalize the financial markets and make every country subject to its whim. And the last 7 countries that were on those lists are also the 7 countries that Al-Qaeda has spread to and we're trying to push for regime change in. Syria,
it's
Iran,
an interesting
North Korea, Pakistan, all these Yemen,
yeah, even Indonesia, and of course those are all places where we heard of isolated bombings and terrorist attacks. And a lot of them involved chemicals, in the last decade. But
and if they think that if anybody does support going into Syria and says we're going to install a new government that's going to be good for the people, democratic. Well, I'm asking you to go look at Iraq right now. How well is Iraq doing?
Have you actually read their constitution? It's an oligarchy.
Well, regardless of what their constitution says, how stable is Iraq?
It's not a democracy or a republic. It's an oligarchy.
Iraq, they're having bombings and stuff just like they did before we go there. It's still chaos. Their country's still shambles. Look at Egypt. Look what happened there. Did they get a lot better government instituted amongst them?
And you know what? To go back to this whole entire, I'm just kind of thinking about things. I mean, look at the countries that belong to the United Nations. I mean, obviously, some of the nations that we brought up we would have war within the United Nations. It would, if you were to go and take things back to World War II and consider the Axis versus the Allies, it's not going to be like that anymore. And the ones that might be on the side allied with the Americans in any conflict that we're talking about right now, based on some of the hypotheses we're putting out there. I mean, Europe is pretty much economically broken. United States is pretty much economically broken.
It's getting closer every
day. Countries like China and Russia are probably going, this is our chance. You know,
China's not far behind. They're in a big
which is a perfect opportunity for them to strike while they can, if they chose, if that's really what they want. I mean, who knows? I don't know. I mean, I'm not really an expert in this kind of stuff, but I mean,
yeah, I mean, if China's economy is overheated, that they've got too much good stuff going on in their economy, that they've got too much money that they don't know what to do with, that they're growing too fast, what better way than to grow their military, to grow the armament industry, and actually, you know,
I mean, if you think about it, that's what the United States did in World War II.
Right.
Well, and
war bonds.
But remember, we also talked about this a while back about the BRICS summit just last year, where they all the countries in the BRICS got together and they decided to start examining suitable currencies to start carrying their country's reserves, financial reserves, in other than the American dollar.
Brazil, Russia, India, China.
In South Africa, I think, is the other one.
The BRICS.
And then, you know, China and Japan will go right at it because there's already been escalations over there, which we talked about before. You know, North Korea can't wait for any opportunity to go and show that they can actually get a rocket across, you know, the ocean.
Well, and it's all a boiling pot. And, you know, whether this war is going to happen, I think war will then be a catalyst for further downturn in economies and be trigger points for financial chaos. Because what happened when we declared war, or we didn't declare war, but we went to this war that we call Iraq and Afghanistan? What happened to our debt since then?
Oh, come on.
It's skyrocketed faster and faster and faster and faster. And then we had boom and bust cycle come in 2007, 2008. And then what happened? Faster than that, 2011, where, you know, we're seeing this recovery that isn't happening, but it's all artificial because the Fed keeps printing more and more.
Oh, yeah.
Just imagine if we're in another war on a bigger scale while all this QE is already happening. It's just going to compound on itself just infinitely.
We're still paying for survivors of the Civil War.
And meanwhile, the welfare state's getting more and more people dependent. The more people that are dependent, the more people cannot affect government change. Or, you know, if you thought that it was hard and people were protesting the Vietnam War back in, you know, the 70s, imagine how hard it's going to be to protest anything that happens today. I mean, there's going to be no chance in hell anything is going to ever get done.
Do you have permission to protest? Do you have a permit? Yep. Papers, please.
That's it. Papers, please. Right into prison.
That's why I think, you know,
we're going to arrest you for resisting arrest.
And they're going to go and start pulling people out of prisons to go and fight in the war.
That's why we got to support, even if you don't support it, we have to support the people who are doing things like what Adam Kokesh is going to be doing with his march to D.C. with rifles.
Which we're not exactly, I mean, we've already discussed the pros and the cons of that.
Yeah, we're not necessarily endorsing that, but you may not agree with it, but support the people in their right to do that, because otherwise,
I mean, if we could get the 10,000 and plus people to do it, it would be a positive and effective protest. Otherwise, it's just going to be something that's going to get absorbed and totally quelled and squashed by the government.
But that's not my point, though. My point is, you don't have to agree with the march, but support the people's right to do it. Support them in their willingness to stand on the line to basically the most extreme degree.
Hell yeah.
And defend
and don't
their
stop
rights.
there, man. Start defending the people that don't want to pay income tax.
Because we need people to stand up and be active like that and resist this federal overreach and this federal control over everything, because then we get into situations like this where the government does whatever they want and puts the world continuously on the brink of world war. And we have people like John McCain wandering over and talking with the same people who are killing my brothers in arms in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they're doing it in public with news coverage. And the news doesn't know what to make of it. What do you think? Is this good or bad?
And just imagine, I mean, all these types of things, I mean, they're going to escalate because what does all this do? It takes the attention away from Obama and Benghazi and what's been going on with the Associated Press and what's been going on with the fact that conservative groups have been targeted by the IRS and, you know, one thing after the other. So
that's why we have to
pretty scary stuff.
That's why we got to do what we've been saying all along. Vote all these freaking snakes out of office. Every single one of them. They don't need to be there anymore. Especially even here in Iowa, like we said. They've been there for 20 years or more. They all are well connected.
Some of them 40.
Well, in one way or another politically involved, yes. It's time to get these people who have been running these scams against the people and involved in every conflict since Vietnam out. And so people who have no connections, no invested interest to continue these things into office so we can end it, so we can try and get our country back to some sort of sane path for our future and for our children. Because right now, what does our future look like? Because it's hard to really tell, but it doesn't look good, whatever it is.
You should save that for the campaign trail.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, please chime in. Get on our website, www.voicesofreason.org. Get on our Facebook, facebook.com/tasteofliberty. We've been talking about all this stuff. If you visit our website,